From Washington, the McLaughlin Group, the American original. For over 3 decades, the sharpest minds, best sources, hardest talk.
Thank you for sharing your time with us again. Our guest today is legal and political analyst Seth Berensweig. Today is our final show of the year and our second award show. But before we get to that, I just want to send all our condolences to the family and friends of Bree Payton, a writer for The Federalist and a frequent commentator on television. Bree was of sharp mind and great humour. She will be very much missed, but always remembered. Okay, let's get to our show. Pat, let's get started with Sorry to See You Go.
I'm going to say a piece of Americana, Sears Roebuck. Anybody that grew up in the 40s and 50s or early 60s has been taken by his parents to the store and going to the store. It is a wonderful part of America, and it's sorry to see it go.
Okay, Eleanor.
I would agree with that. That's a good one. I have General Mattis from the Pentagon. Sorry to see him go. And John McCain from the Senate. His voice will be missed. And I have to add Jerry Brown stepping down after his 4th term as governor in California, although he will still be around leading the charge on climate change.
Good stuff. Seth.
Well, I concur on all counts, but also I pick Senator John McCain. With deepest respect, he will be very much missed, and future generations will continue to learn a lot from his patriotism and his unbelievably solid character.
Great. Clarence.
Well, I agree with all those choices, and I also bring up Kofi Annan, who was passed away this past year, and is kind of, with all the other news going on, it's easy to give a short shrift to, but he really represented the importance of human rights as an issue, which means a lot now these days when human rights isn't getting the same priority it used to.
Former UN Secretary General. I'm going to go with, I agree with Senator McCain, of course, but I'm going to go with Bree Payton. It's very sad to lose someone so young and talented. I only met her a couple of times. Wonderful lady. Was very close to some of my friends, so it's a very tragic moment. Anyway, most honest, Pat.
I'm going to say Rand Paul and Congressman Jimmy Duncan, a Pat Buchanan Republican, he calls himself. Both are retiring. Both are honest guys. Both are anti-war, anti-interventionists. They stand up for their beliefs and fight for them.
Eleanor.
And,
I'm going with General Mattis again, and the farewell letter that he wrote, really reminding us of the character and the virtues of this country that this president seems to not want to pay attention to.
Mine.
And the runner-up has got to be Rex Tillerson, the deposed Secretary of State, who went on to explain that this president never read anything, never listened to briefings, and asked him to do lots of things that he had to explain were illegal. Mr. Tillerson also did not refute his allegedly calling the president a moron.
Okay. Seth.
Well, Eleanor, great minds think alike. I also select General Mattis, but I would certainly say that the most honest moment of the year was when General Mattis sat down in what I would imagine was an interesting moment of solitude and wrote that letter. Few words, loud signal, and that was certainly one of the most honest moments, and we don't see too many of those here in Washington.
Right.
Clarence.
I keep coming back to Michelle Obama. Now that her husband's out of office, she has been able to give us a new level of candor. I especially believe her when she says that she'll never forgive President Trump for initiating the birther myth. He didn't initiate it, but he kept it alive and spread it and put her family in jeopardy from her point of view.
Very good. I'm going to go with Mr. Mattis as well, but I think he will have the benefit of, or the American people will have the benefit of him teaching students in the future. So, worst lie, Pat.
Jamal Khashoggi died in a fist fight accidentally in the Istanbul consulate, and it was just happenstance that somebody had a bone saw with him. That's the story we were given by the Saudi regime and the prince.
Eleanor.
Mexico will pay for the wall. It's got to be the worst lie. But a recent lie just this week when the president boasted to the troops that he alone beat back Democratic naysayers to secure them a 10% pay raise, when in fact they got a 2.6% pay raise, and they get a pay raise of that amount virtually every year. The president said they hadn't gotten one for more than a decade, and if it weren't for him, they wouldn't have a pay raise.
Worst lie of the year was the moment when the president on the plane said, I have no idea how the money was paid to Stormy Daniels. I don't know from where it was paid. You'd have to ask my lawyer. Michael is my attorney. Now, unfortunately for the president, he's being referred to in New York as individual one.
Okay, Clarence.
Well, President Trump was really trying to take this category because he gave us such an oversupply of candidates. I will say that the worst lie to me was his denying that 3,000 people died in the Puerto Rican hurricane, and blamed it. I'll call it a myth you blamed on the Democrats.
Okay, all right. My worst lie will be Vladimir Putin of Russia and the Novichok incident in the UK, claiming that those two gentlemen were just seeing Salisbury Cathedral, which they were not. Capitalist of the year, Pat.
They were tourists. I'm going to give it to Rupert Murdoch. I mean, he played Comcast against Disney and sold off his properties at a huge gain to himself, moved up on the top billionaires. You know, and he's just an outstanding businessman his entire career.
Are you trying to get a job on Fox?
No. I did offer me a job, but that was about 25 years ago.
All right, Eleanor.
Ivanka Trump, Capitalist of the Year. After saying she was ending her clothing line, she's been racking up all these branding rights in China for shoes, jewelry, and including sausage casings, whatever that's about.
Okay, Seth, on that note.
That's tough to beat, but my pick is Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos is the richest man in the world. He took a modest online bookstore into one of the true commercial behemoths. He is now researching how to deliver the last mile in commerce. He's testing out drones. And while other tech titans such as Mr. Zuckerberg and Elon Musk have taken a dive, he's flying to new heights.
Okay.
Bill Gates was just deposed after 24 years
as the top
as
dog.
richest man in the world.
There you go.
By your man.
Yes, indeed.
That's
yes,
right.
indeed.
Clarence.
Well, the best rising capitalist, a 9-year-old girl in San Diego, who sold over 300 boxes of Girl Scout cookies by setting up shop in front of a marijuana dispensary.
Oh, that's smart.
That's great.
Now that's,
all right.
She's got a future.
Well, Seth stole mine. It was going to be Jeff Bezos, but I'm going to go with Walmart. Walmart's putting a lot of resources in to try and challenge Amazon for that domination of the online retail space. That is good for consumers. Competition there. All right. Best political theatre.
I'm going to say Susan Collins, and a senator from Maine in her speech on behalf of Kavanaugh. I don't always agree with Susan. I don't agree with the entire speech, but was one of the best crafted, best delivered speeches I've seen in the Congress of the United States in a long, long time. It was outstanding.
Interesting.
They probably guaranteed her Democratic opposition when she runs in 2020. Right. My candidate is the Nancy Chuck Oval Office meeting with Donald when they got Trump to own the Trump shutdown, to say, I will happily wear that mantle. And he's wearing it as we speak.
Okay, Seth.
My moment of political theater for the year is the meeting in Singapore between our president and Kim Jong-un, where they stepped in front of the flags with much pomp and circumstance. We were tweeted, "You can all sleep soundly tonight. We are no longer under threat."
Okay.
Thank goodness for that.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, as a sad note, the Parkland High School kids in Florida who, after surviving school massacre, took the issue to the streets and really, as far as political theater goes, this issue has been a tough one to fight against the NRA in recent years, but they really affected the debate and I think inspired a lot of other young people and other folks not to give up hope on their political
Okay.
Well, they had a huge gun safety march in Washington that
Yes.
broke a lot of records.
That's right.
Okay. Second time in a row, Seth has stolen
Oh, no.
my comment. Let's go something different. The dialogue between President Trump on Twitter and the Iranians on Twitter, Ayatollah Khamenei and President Rouhani. At least they're not fighting. Dialogue on Twitter can never be that bad a thing. Worst political theatre.
I'm going to give it to the President of the United States down in Puerto Rico, where he emulated Tom Brady and took the paper towels and fired them at the poor Puerto Ricans who had suffered through the hurricane. Classy as it could be.
All right, Eleanor.
I give it to the Justice Kavanaugh hearings and the Republican pile-on Christine Blasey Ford.
I give mine to the dark day in Helsinki, where the president met with Vladimir Putin. When he heard Mr. Putin say that I have a great idea, I would like to interrogate various Americans, and the president literally looked out to everybody and said, I think that's a fantastic idea.
Right.
Since you've all taken the North Korea stories from me, I'm going to nominate Elizabeth Warren for her DNA testing in regard to trying to prove her Native American ancestry. It just was a blooper. Didn't work.
Does everyone agree with that? Pat, do you think she can come back?
Is she a Cherokee or what was she?
It's way too early to write off anyone.
Too small a sample
Subject
to
to
determine
further
the tribe.
review.
Okay. My worst political theatre is the protesters, the Yellow Jackets, who entered the Arc de Triomphe and smashed their own history, which to me is not perhaps the best rendering of populism in the service of a great nation's history. Pat, you agree with that? Or do you support the yellow vests?
No, I don't like what they did at the Arc de Triomphe at all.
Yeah, exactly.
It's appalling.
Macron needs to be tougher on them. All right, when we come back, socialists, the good, the bad, and the ugly of government programs, and stars in waiting. See you in a moment.
For more than a century, the Greater Washington Board of Trade has focused on growing our regional economy. We work every day to foster collaboration, build pipelines for skilled workers, embrace innovation, and attract investment. We must think, plan, and act as a region to better leverage our shared assets so we can continue shaping and advancing a vibrant regional economy for the next 100 years.
And we're back with Socialist of the Year.
Nicolas Maduro, the protege of Hugo Chavez of Venezuela, who showed us if you really take socialism to its nth degree, this is what it will produce, which is a real disaster.
Good one. Eleanor.
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who is the young woman who won the Queens district, probably near where I grew up. She's an avowed member of the Democratic Socialists of America, and she's got some very good ideas. Particularly, she's forcing the Congress to deal with more urgency on climate change. She's got a new Green Deal that I think will be adopted somewhat by the Democrats. So she's a force for good. She'll be disruptive as well.
That's my pick as well. I agree. I think that she sparked a small revolution in New York. She unseated a very popular and long-standing Democratic leader. She's the youngest woman ever to serve in the Congress. And she also has this unique flair to kind of do selfie videos to share her thoughts of coming in, which is very interesting.
Right, exactly.
So.
Clarence.
Well, since everyone, as I expected, picked the obvious, I'm going to pick outgoing House Speaker Paul Ryan, who came in as a deficit hawk, fighting for a small government, and he's left us with the biggest deficit we've ever had. And after accepting tactics that they rejected for Barack Obama, on whom they put ceiling on his spending.
Do you think Brian's a socialist?
Have
you met any right-wingers?
If you view big government as socialist, yes.
Right.
All right.
Fair enough.
My Socialist of the Year is Elon Musk, Tesla. Without the government subsidies he relies upon, I think Mr. Musk would have far more trouble. He is big on promises, but somewhat less auspicious on delivery. Best government program.
First responders, not only in the hurricanes on the East Coast and all the rest of it, but in the fires on the West Coast, they did a phenomenal job. And I also would add the private sector folks who took their electrical trucks and fixed those power lines and came from all over the country and are still doing it, including the Cajun Navy.
Okay. Eleanor.
Best government program, Obamacare, which has provided health care to millions of people who would otherwise have zero access. But I also want to put in a good word for the Farm Bill that the Congress passed, which for the first time has programs that help farm animals, humanitarian help for farm animals. I know Pat agrees with that, actually.
No, we're not against
Yes,
that.
I know, right.
They've got to cut those subsidies, though.
Pat and I are cat lovers, and so I stretch his love of cats out further to include farm animals.
Very good. The unity of
I got a
cats.
PETA award one year.
Right, I remember
Did you really?
he did.
It was for defending those goose. They stuff all that stuff.
Foie gras.
Foie
Yeah,
gras,
exactly.
right.
I said that was cruel and
Right.
unusual punishment, and they ought to stop it and do away with eating that kind of stuff.
Look at that.
Good.
You might make some
Wow.
use of that. Very good. Does anyone, do you like foie gras?
I like foie gras.
Okay, see?
Don't tell Peter. I'm going to get picking it.
All right, enough on this
very
foie
good for
gras.
you.
Seth?
Okay, here's where I give my shout out for the year to FEMA.
Yeah.
FEMA has done incredible things and has literally saved lives during a tumultuous year. Just the other day, they were stuck in the middle in terms of how to handle flood insurance, and they were told that they had to pull it out. But then a whole bunch of closings couldn't happen for real estate, and then they came back in with a lot of financial uncertainty. So
Right.
floods, fires, they go out there and they save lives.
Very good.
Right.
Clarence.
Okay.
Well, I agree with you on Obamacare, particularly on pre-existing conditions coverage, which has worked so well, become so popular that now Republicans, including Donald Trump, are claiming that they're defenders of it, even as they try to tear it apart.
What do people think about the idea with pre-existing conditions being able to charge someone who can afford it 200% what the other person be charged? I think I should do that.
Who's
That's
proposing
worth the
that?
bit.
Me. I have a heart condition, so I think I should pay 200% what my contemporary of a
I think you
32-year-old.
should pay more than that.
All right. Okay.
Well, we'll have to see what your bottom line is
Yeah.
first.
All right. Well, people
We're
who
going
can.
to do means testing.
All right. Okay. My best government program is DARPA, the Defense Research Agency, which generates high-end technologies for the military so as to hopefully provide deterrent posture into the future, keep our country safe. Okay, what is our next one? It is...
That's
the-
excellent.
government
John
waste.
Poindexter, a friend of mine, used to run DARPA.
Okay, all right.
Go ahead.
Oh, biggest
What's-
government waste.
I think the annual U.S. contribution to the UN, most of which is probably spent up there in all those restaurants in New York City.
Okay, Eleanor.
I'm for the UN. Bottom line, biggest government waste, the president sending those troops to the southern border to guard against a caravan that didn't even arrive. Big ticket item for the Pentagon and totally needless.
The now defunct Voter Fraud Commission, which was disbanded in the first quarter of this
Right.
year. They went out looking for massive fraud of fraudulent millions of voters. This was such a bizarre commission that the minority of Democrats on the commission, when they asked for an agenda, was refused. And then after litigation ensued, it suddenly went away. So I don't think that was a very good use of
What do you think the
resources.
motivation was?
Well, let's see. I think that the motivation was try to put some kind of an imprimatur of approval on the theory that somehow the president won the popular vote. And it's okay that he didn't, because this is our system, and until it's changed, we have the Electoral College.
Clarence.
Well, I agree that the response to the caravan qualifies both as bad political theater as well as a waste. Now, we haven't spent money on the U.S. Space Force yet, but I see it coming. And there's big questions whether we need it, because we've already got a Space Force inside the Air Force. We shall see.
Okay. My biggest government waste is going to be the failure of government to reform entitlements, in the sense it's a waste for the future. Future generations will not have access to the same measure of services. There must be reform. It's a failure of political leadership on all sides. Destined for political stardom.
I'm going to surprise you. I think Beto O'Rourke, he could run for the Senate, he could run for VP, he could run for president. I think on the Democratic side, he's got youth, energy, and excitement. And among the so-called front-runners, if he got 5 of them, he's the only one I think it's sort of got it all together. So I would look to him to perform fairly well.
Eleanor.
I would agree with that, but I would look to the Congress, and I think the 3 chairs of the big 3 committees, Judiciary, Intelligence, and Government Oversight, we're going to be hearing a lot about them. And also number 5 in the Democratic leadership now, a new face, Hakeem Jeffries. I think he's on his way to being the next Speaker of the House.
Before I go to Seth, do you think there are any rising Republican stars? Do you have your eye on? No.
Mitt Romney. I'm
Mitt
counting
Romney,
on
okay.
Mitt Romney.
Okay, all right. Very good.
Right, rising from the ashes.
Mike Pompeo will have a very busy year. He's going to be basically the new frontman for the Beatles, if you will. He's going to be doing a lot of traveling. He's going to be the mouthpiece to articulate the new vision across the planet, and he's going to have a very busy year coming up ahead.
Clarence.
Well, if I can paraphrase Dana Carvey from Saturday Night Live, Sherrod Brown still gaining acceptance out there. I missed a couple of weeks ago. I think he's got rising star power because he's got so much appeal to Trump voters, demographics, as well as liberal Democrats. For those of you who don't know, he's a Democratic senator from Ohio.
Yeah,
and
has a
he's
future.
very careful to note when he talks about working class people, he means white and black. He's
Right.
not just targeting the folks that supported Trump. He's got an expansive populist message. He doesn't like free trade, Pat. He's your kind of guy.
Yeah,
All right, we'll leave it with that face. All right,
Pat's still deciding.
I'm going to go with
Thinking of my next
I'm going to go with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez for the simple fact that, as everyone has said, she's extremely apt at doing her delivery of message. She's leading on issues, and whatever you think of her politics, I think she has a very bright future next year. Destined for oblivion, political oblivion.
Eleanor's earlier candidate, Democratic candidate, Michael Avenatti, I don't think is going to make it this year.
Oh, wow, yeah. That's a good one.
I was never on the Michael Avenatti bandwagon, I must say. Oblivion, I would say the Freedom Caucus, the group of far-right Republicans in the House who basically had a stranglehold on Paul Ryan, helped drive him out. They're going to be sort of useless as the Democrats go forward.
How the mighty have fallen. Paul Ryan, once the very youthful and very up-and-coming VP candidate, now quietly leaving Washington with his tail between his legs. Difficult to see how he would ever step forward into a serious public office again, and really how the times have changed as far as the former mainstream of the Republican Party is concerned.
He was always a fraud, Seth. He really was.
But he cared about entitlements.
He did indeed, until he had power to do something about it. But anyway,
Thanks for that rejoinder. All
no,
right.
I just have to
That's right.
agree. I thought nobody would pick Michael Avenatti. I don't know why I thought that, but I agree. I don't have a backup. Although other people will go into oblivion this year. I see it coming.
Okay.
So
we can always
Avenatti was your choice as well?
Me too. Yeah.
My destined for political oblivion is Senator Elizabeth Warren. Completely mishandled the Native American situation, and she has been usurped in her
What
role as
Native
the
American situation?
well,
Her
exactly.
ancestry issue.
the non-existent
talking about?
situation.
President calling her Pocahontas and meaning
Indigenous
it as a
people.
slur when
Well-
Pocahontas is a significant figure in Native American history.
Thank you. That's right.
English American history, Pocahontas is
All right,
more
English
famous.
American.
All right.
All
We're
right,
going to go to the
whatever.
next one. Biggest out there story for 2019, Pat.
I think it's deadly serious. The Russians have given up on the United States, I think, and they're moving closer and closer to China. You get the old Sino-Soviet alliance coming together. The National Interest magazine, an excellent magazine,
It is a
has
good
got
magazine.
the cover story, 2 stories in there on it. Real problems down the road for the United States, and part of the reason is that Trump has been basically blocked from doing what I think his instincts told him to do, which is reach out to the Russians, even given the problems we've got.
We have an Indo-American alliance, though. Great
luck.
power politics. Eleanor.
I'm going to stick with something a whole lot lighter. I think Michelle Obama is on track to winning a Pulitzer for her book, Becoming. And she tells her story, which is truly an American story, in the same depth and insight that Katharine Graham told her story. And Katharine Graham, of course, was the publisher of the Washington Post. She came from a very different background. She came from wealth and grandeur, and she made it in an all-male world at a time when very few women were doing it. She tells her story in a way that got her the Pulitzer, and I think Michelle will get it as well.
I'm going to go to a darker place. I think that the story that no one really talked about this year is global population growth. That is a phenomenon that is happening. No one's really talking about it, and it's going to put a strain on food supply, climate, and many other things.
Immigration.
Clarence.
Well,
Indeed.
no one's really talking about the camel beauty contest in Saudi Arabia this year, where about a dozen camels were disqualified for Botox use.
Okay.
This is a scandal.
All right, running low on time. My out there story is the Balkans. Unfortunately, more tensions next year. When we come back, macro prediction.
When I was a freshman in college, I lost my brother Brian to suicide. Brian had been a very successful college student himself who was president of an a cappella group, sports editor of a newspaper, 3.8 GPA at an Ivy League university. And what we learned is that he started experiencing some pretty severe mental health issues in his freshman year of college. He started experiencing depression and hearing voices, some psychosis, and yet he hid it. He hid it from me. He hid it from his friends. He hid it from all of his teachers because he was scared. He was ashamed. He didn't know what this meant. He thought he was the only one who was struggling, and he thought it was his fault. Brian eventually went and sought help in his senior year. The hopelessness and the helplessness that accompanies depression had gotten to him, and had gotten to him so strong that just about a year later, in my freshman year of college, Brian died by suicide.
Macro prediction, Pat.
The Democrats' sort of new majority, if you will, of ethnic groups and racial groups and other interest groups and identity groups, I think you're going to see that begin to come apart. You already see Israel, for example, is being beaten up by millennials and by the left in the Democratic Party, the socialists. I think you've also got the Asian Americans say they're being discriminated against in colleges and elite schools. And these are all the fault lines in this coalition. I think they're going to become stronger and stronger and stronger and eventually break it apart.
Interesting. Eleanor.
The only way Trump can win re-election is if there's a third-party candidate. He is a plurality winner. He never won cleanly a Republican primary. He certainly didn't win the presidency with a majority. He cannot win a majority, and where he penetrated the blue wall, that's crumbling. And now that you have the stock market gyrations and the potential of the economy slowing, his claim to win re-election is significantly weakened. But so beware of third-party candidates. I think if Jill Stein hadn't been in 2016, Hillary Clinton would be president today.
Seth.
World debt will become a huge issue in 2019. Our ballooning national debt will exceed $22 billion. The IMF reports that the debt of other countries exceeds $165 trillion. This is going to create market tension, and it's going to also create a new crisis and a moment of distrust, because the administration is going to have a very difficult time understanding exactly how to handle it.
Do you support me on the need for entitlement reform here at home?
Yes, I think there needs to be some entitlement reform, and of course the proof's in the pudding.
Good. Good. At least I have one member supporting me on that. Clarence.
I think Trump's apparently growing weaknesses are very inviting for a primary challenge. Whether or not it will be effective depends on who it is and how much they can penetrate Trump's very strong. About 85% of the Republican Party right now is Trump supporters. He's really taken over the party.
If you had to pick one name, who would it be?
Mitt Romney.
Okay, all right.
Hey, why not?
All right, my prediction for next year will be that North Korea-US tensions unfortunately will escalate. I think the North Koreans will test a new missile because the US won't cede ground on sanctions and the North Koreans won't deconstruct their facilities as much as we would wish them to. We'd like to thank you all very much for supporting us in 2018. Thank you for watching each week with your families, and we look forward to sharing some exciting news with you in 2019. Until then, have a very happy New Year's Eve and a happy New Year.